Oh boy, 2014 was an awesome year for me. I turned 18, started university, I made a bunch of new friends both on and off the internet, and above all, it was a year of so many firsts. It seems as though this year was also the year that the new console generation finally kicked off, with so many developers trying something new, resulting in games like Hyrule Warriors and Call of Duty Advanced Warfare breathing new life into somewhat formulaic gaming franchises. Naturally, this also inspired me to try something new myself. This year I expanded my horizons immensely and pretty much rocket jumped out of my comfort zone to try out as many new games as I possibly could. Some I found to be mind-blowingly amazing, made me wonder just what the hell I'd missed, and others were, for lack of a better term, shit. However, instead of doing just what everyone else does and makes a countdown about my favourite games I played last year, I'm going to do one better. I'm instead going to be counting down my favourite franchises that I first tried out in 2014. It doesn't matter what system they were for, it doesn't matter when these franchises debuted, or even what game I first played from said franchise. As long as I first played it in 2014, it counts. But one last thing before we start. I consider a game series to be a franchise if it has at least 3 games. So unfortunately, standalone titles like The Last of Us and 2 game series like Bayonetta don't qualify. Now that long introduction is out of the way, sit back, relax, and let the games begin.
Playtime is over.
Fighting games and me have a sort of odd relationship. On the one hand, we have insanely flashy and fast-paced combat that I absolutely adore, but then we have the overly complex control schemes that unfortunately turn me away. No offense to Capcom, but the Hadouken is part of pop culture now. It shouldn't take a 6-button combo just to throw a small blast of energy a few feet. However, as much as I like Smash Brothers, I like something a bit more to play with than just 12 moves on the ground and 4 in the air, although the custom movesets in Smash 4 were a nice touch. PlayStation All-Stars gave us much more variety in terms of moves, but it's a standalone game so I can't include it. Dissidia Final Fantasy had a good idea with the much more simplistic combos, but Final Fantasy is primarily an RPG series, not to mention that I first played FF7 way back in 2011. So, what's a countdown artist to do? Well, thank God for Tekken. Compared to the other main so-called arcade fighters, Tekken plays a little differently, and seems to take itself a little more seriously, until the cast expanded to include a bear who knows kung fu, a kickboxing kangaroo, a fat guy named Bob, a training dummy brought to life, and whatever the hell Elisa is. When you first start playing Tekken, you'll immediately notice that the gameplay feels a little slower compared to most fighting games, but this really isn't a problem. Once you start trading blows with the players of the AI in arcade mode, it quickly picks up the pace. The interesting thing about it is that in each Tekken game, each main limb of the body is assigned to one button. For example, in the PlayStation versions, the square and triangle buttons are punch attacks and the X and circle buttons are kick attacks. This may be odd, but it means that some of the combos are as simple as pressing 2 buttons while moving the left analog stick a certain way. This combo system really works in the series' favour, making it really easy to perform powerful moves, grabs, pummels, throws, and even critical arts, which are basically Tekken's version of finishes. This simpler method of gameplay also makes Tekken really easy for first-time players to learn, yet at the same time still requires some significant skill and practice in order to master. Compared to my first experience with Street Fighter, which was basically just me mashing the buttons and hoping something impressive would happen. However, no game would be complete without its characters, and unlike most fighting games, you don't really need to read extended material and second guess them while trying to figure out the characters' stories. Each character has some sort of interesting personality trait and backstory, which makes them very three-dimensional, and their stories give me something other than their gameplay styles and motivation to keep playing, which is something only really Mortal Kombat 9 did through its story mode. From what I've seen, there really isn't one character that I honestly dislike for the wrong reasons. From series protagonist Jin, to schoolgirl ninja Asuka, to cold-hearted ninja assassin Nina, even to the stuck-up rich kid Lily, the fallen hero Kazuya, and the evil bastard Heihachi, all are a blast to play as, and each is a well-thought-out characterization. One last thing to mention, each character actually speaks their native language, which is an interesting twist compared to most other fighting games where they all speak English. For example, Chinese schoolgirl Jia Yu speaks Mandarin, British boxer Steve Fox speaks English with a London accent, and the Machina family members speak Japanese. Well, that's not really that important, but it's a nice touch.
Playtime is over.
Okay, I'll admit it. I never played a Metroid game until September of last year when I bought a copy of Metroid Other M, which later led to me buying a copy of Metroid Prime 3 2 months later and downloading a ROM of Super Metroid onto my laptop. All I can say is, my god was I missing out big time. Normally I'm a little turned off by games that are based around exploration simply because I need to have some hint of whatever it is I'm supposed to do, but the Metroid series managed to overcome this problem by giving you an almost ideal balance between linear gameplay and freedom of exploration, while throwing in some amazing kick-ass combat and power-ups along the way. In a similar way to The Legend of Zelda, each Metroid game changed up the gameplay by adding a new little twist, with the two most striking examples being the jump to Metroid Prime, which has a first-person perspective rather than be a 2D side-scroller, and the jump to Metroid Other M, which plays like a fusion of a 3D adventure game slash shoot 'em up in the classic Metroid formula, with a few Metroid Prime-like first-person segments thrown into the mix. I honestly enjoyed Other M's gameplay a lot more than the two types. Shame its story needed a little bit more attention, otherwise it could have had the perfect Metroid game. Please let the next one have Other M's gameplay, Nintendo. I'll play triple for Majora's Mask 3D if it'll help. Just do it. Although, what's the use having a grand adventure like the Metroid series if there aren't a decent character in the series to enjoy these adventures with? So, the Metroid series delivers in style with the first lady of female game protagonist herself, Samus Aran. This badass lady bounty hunter enters the fray clad head to foot in a virtually indestructible power suit equipped with an arm cannon, various missiles and bombs, a speed booster, and of course the infamous screw attack, not that one. That's better. Although Samus herself isn't the only character in the series, because that would be extremely boring. There's Mentor Adam Malkovich, fellow bounty hunter and charismatic Rundus, and Samus' arch nemesis Ridley, who should have been in Smash Brothers, goddamn you Sakurai! However, the series isn't without its faults. I found Morphball to be really boring and irritating, Other M suffered from annoying difficulty spikes and was played by forced first-person search segments, and some of the bosses in the series aren't exactly amazing. Spider Garden, anyone? However, I can look past most of these issues and see the Metroid series for what it truly is. A grand adventure in the depths of space filled with danger, wonder, and mystery. Now, only if we could actually get another Metroid game in the near future. Or at least a remake.
Playtime is over.
What happens when you take Evil Dead, mix with Alien, and have a poor unfortunate engineer sort out the whole mess? You get Dead Space. Dead Space is honestly one of the few horror games out there that I enjoy. It doesn't rely heavily on jump scares, schmuck bait, or any other horror game cliches. Instead it opts to go down the paranoia route, making the entire series be more based around what isn't there or what could be there, rather than what is there. And does this all without throwing the cheap jump scare in your face every time you turn a corner. The whole series then ends up creating a very tense and unique atmosphere which truly captured what it feels like to be trapped in the far reaches of space, creating a feeling of loneliness and desperation as you explore the various abandoned space stations, spaceships and other installations throughout the series. However, creepy environments can only get you so far. A horror game is always only as effective as its enemies, and Dead Space's main enemies, the Necromorphs, certainly deliver. Being used as more of a gameplay mechanic than an enemy, each type of Necromorph offers up a unique challenge and a way to defeat it. And some can offer up different scares, like the Necromorph Nursery in Dead Space 2, the Elevator Necromorph in Dead Space 1, and the Feeder Necromorphs from Dead Space 3. God, I hate those things. Grr. They even have a nasty habit of popping up wherever and whenever you least expect them to, making that closed-off empty room with only one door seem a lot more intimidating and dangerous than at first glance. But I'm repeating what I said in my Halloween special, so I'll move on. One last thing I want to talk about is the main combat system of the series. Of course you have your standard 2-weapon loadout, but you also have a melee stomp move to make sure those annoying Necromorphs stay dead, and it's also useful for busting up into containers, a rechargeable stasis module to slow down enemies, limited use scrap bots to gather health packs, ammo and other useful items, a kinesis model which you can use not just to pick up items and hurl them around, but to pull blades and other body parts of enemies and throw them right back at them. When it comes to the weapons in Dead Space, there are really no set weapon types. Sure, there are the basic weapon frames like shotguns, flamethrowers, 3-shot burst submachine guns, but all the others appear to be modified repurposed power tools, like buzzsaw launchers, impact hammers, and strangely enough, a hydraulic knife. What makes all these weapons even more interesting is that in Dead Space 3, you can combine these weapons in any way you want. Shotgun with blowtorch with a laser pointer attachment, bowler's shooter with a hydraulic knife, whatever combination you can think of, you can create it. Naturally, this means you can mix and match your loadout to fit any type of situation you want. Do you go for precision, damage over time, setting traps, or do you do what I do and create two weapons designed to cause as much dismemberment as humanly possible?
Playtime is over.
I think it's time we took a look at something a little bit more, shall we say, bloody and brutal, because our number 7 entry is God of War. As a huge fan of the Greek myths, I was really eager to give God of War a try, and it's really not half bad. Gameplay wise it's pretty decent, giving you tons of weapons and attacks for you to play with, for you to tear enemies apart in many brutal ways, and whenever the game decides to throw a puzzle or two your way, it actually fits in the gameplay style of the series and doesn't feel forced. Most of the time. Granted, the series isn't without its faults. The characters aren't exactly that great, what with Kratos being an utter asshole and most of the main villains being there just so you have something to stab. Not to mention the story of each game extends as far as random Greek god screws Kratos over, Kratos gets pissed, Kratos goes on murderous rampage, eventually kills said god. In the first game it was Ares, then Persephone, then Thanatos, no not that one, then Zeus, and then finally every other god on Olympus. Naturally, this means that the series' main strength is its gameplay, with insanely brutal and devastating combos, ridiculous finishing moves that actually made me cringe just by seeing them, buckets upon buckets of blood, and quick time events that actually don't suck. You see, game developers, this is how you make quick time events. You have them often enough so the player knows to expect them, but not too often so the game doesn't become dull and repetitive. Also that the command prompts are easy to follow, are responsive, and give you plenty of time to react. You know, aside from that, there really isn't that much to talk about in terms of gameplay. Although there are the various weapons Kratos uses, with each of them taken from the various people he dispatches, ranging from chain blades, a bow and arrow, giant wings, metal gauntlets, hooks, a hammer, and even the head of the Greek god of the sun. Now we head to the thing people really remember this series for, the bosses. This series has tons of great bosses ready and waiting to go. Giant monsters, a living statue, demigods, ancient immortal warriors, and even the Greek gods and the Lord of the Titans, Kronos himself. All of these are no match for Kratos' wrath, and all of these are insanely awesome fights. Except for this guy, and that thing. Okay, so not exactly all great, but most of the bosses are downright fantastic. Hell, when the first boss of the entire series is the goddamn Hydra, and when the first boss of the third game is none other than the sea god Poseidon himself, you know you're in for one heck of a ride.
Playtime is over.
What happens when you take a wide open sandbox, add superpowers, and then throw in a morality system for good measure? You get one of the more interesting entries on this list, Infamous. While this may seem like a bit of a cop-out, seeing as there are only really full 3-length games in the series, with one non-canon side game, Festival of Blood, and a prequel chapter to the most recent game, Infamous Second Son, known as Infamous First Light, being available as shorter download-only titles, although First Light was recently released in hard copy form. But, as always, my list, my rules. So, let's get back on track. The main premise of this series is the old-style cliché of the ordinary guy gaining superpowers in some sort of accident, which then kickstarts their adventure filled with tons of tough moral choices along the way. Naturally, aside from the powers, is Infamous' main selling point. You start off each game as neutral, and the actions you take decide your ultimate karmic path, either heroic or evil. These karmic choices can take the form of being selfish or generous with supplies, sparing or killing those who get in your way, and even taking the form of more extreme acts like choosing to jump in and stop gang violence, or simply ignoring it at the cost of innocent lives. As I stated before, all the choices you make throughout the series fuel a karma meter, which determines your karmic rank, which in turn determines how the story plays out, how the characters in the story treat you, what optional side missions become available, and even what powers you get. It's sort of hard to sum up the story of the series considering how complex it is, and I don't want to spoil anything for those who have an interest in trying the series out sometime. Although I will say that the series does draw a lot of parallels with the X-Men franchise. Think about it. Ordinary people realizing that they are in fact a new breed of superpowered humans, here known as conduits, due to a special gene, with these people later being persecuted by a special group of extremists with the rest of the population either hating or fearing them. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Then we come to the gameplay of the series. Like the story and side missions, this too is dependent on the karma system. In Infamous 1 and 2 you play as Cole McGrath, initially wielding the power of electrokinesis, gaining additional power to play with in the second game depending on the choices you make, the good path giving you access to cryokinesis and the evil path giving you access to pyrokinesis. As you progress, you unlock different upgrades and additional powers depending on your karmic rank, with good karma allowing you access to more precision and utility-based powers, precision targeting for attacks, trapping enemies in blocks of ice, overloading nearby electrical devices in order to stun enemies, and using ice spikes to launch in the air, whereas the evil karma allows you to use a lot more area of effect and much more destructive types of powers, launching cluster rockets, draining the life force of enemies, charging towards enemies creating an explosion on the mode of impact, and even giving your standard bolt attack the ability to create exploding headshots. However, in Second Son it works a little differently. The upgrades and karma systems from previous games return, except this time we get a new player character known as Delzin Rowe, and he has the ability to copy the powers of the conduits, originally starting out with power of smoke, then neon, then video, and finally concrete. This naturally gives you a crap ton of powers and abilities to play with each power offering up a different playstyle that you can cycle between at any time. So if you like morality systems, superpowers, and the freedom to do whatever the hell you want, whenever you want, I'd seriously recommend giving this series a try. Although, if you live in the UK, you better have deep pockets if you want a copy of Second Son. £55 new and 30 quid used? Do these developers think I'm made of money?
Playtime is over.
Want more zombies? How about a little Resident Evil? Yes, our number 5 entry is the granddaddy of all survival horror games and one of Capcom's finest series to date. Unless you count Resident Evil 6, which nobody does anyways. Resident Evil is essentially the forefather of the survival horror genre. While there may have been horror games before this, they were mainly just point and click style games, with the two most popular being Clock Tower and Shadowgate. However, Resident Evil managed to change this with the fully controlled characters and provided the players with actual means to dispatch the enemies you come across. The series actually introduced quite a few horror game staples, like the super powerful mutant creature that serves as the final boss, and the oh so annoying idea of jump scares. Admit it, you crap yourself with the zombie dogs, didn't you? The main storyline of each game and each game's basic premise is that a bunch of special forces agents go into a certain area to deal with a certain threat, and then they end up in a zombie outbreak. To date, and to my knowledge, the only games in the series that go against this formula are 3 and 5, where the main story of 3 involves fleeing from a zombie superweapon, and in Resident Evil 5, where the main character goes to Africa in an attempt to prevent a zombie outbreak, and ends up involved in said outbreak, which includes a number of mutant super zombies. The series actually offers up a unique style of combat, with all your weapons, ammo, healing items, and key items being stored in an inventory-like system with limited space, forcing you to manage your resources and balance your current equipment for a particular point in the game, or just use Resident Evil 4's infinite ammo gun to breach the whole thing. Man, I love the typewriter. However, there is a slight problem with the combat style of the series. You cannot move and shoot at the same time. As the original games, you set camera angles at fixed positions, and the newer games focus more on using the camera as merely a tool to locate enemies and peek around corners. This means that there is no aim control. However, Capcom found a way around this by making the move button the aim button as soon as you pull out a weapon. Unfortunately, this means that you can't move and attack at the same time, which is fine if there are only 1 or 2 enemies attacking you, or if you're in a cramped area where enemies can only come from one direction at a time, but it's not so good when you're being swarmed from all sides and need to keep moving. But thanks to how simple the weapons are to control, and the new quick turn mechanic introduced in the later games, you get the hang of this awkward control scheme fairly quickly. One thing that Resident Evil introduced to the horror genre was boss battles. While this may not seem like much now, back then it was fairly unique. Most proper horror games feature an enemy that pursue you throughout the entire game, eventually dying through some form of Deus Ex Machina in a similar vein to the slash movies that were so popular in the 1970s and 80s. Unfortunately, Resident Evil's bosses aren't exactly its greatest strength. I mean, we have amazing bosses like the fights against, spoiler alert, Jill Valentine in Resident Evil 5, Nemesis in Resident Evil 3, and most of the bosses in Resident Evil 4. However, there are a few stingers among Krauser and the Pop Karimo both spring to mind here, meaning that the bosses are very hit or miss. Despite this, it's not enough to bring the franchise down. With a HD remake of the first game coming out next year, I can't think of a better time to give this franchise a go. You might just surprise yourself. I know I did.
Playtime is over.
We seem to be seeing a lot of action-oriented franchises on this list, don't we? So how about we move to our next entry, which also happens to be one of the most popular hack and slash series of all time, Devil May Cry. Out of all the franchises on this list, Devil May Cry is the only series where I played every single game from it, from the original Devil May Cry all the way up to DMC Devil May Cry. If you're an action lover like me, you'll probably get into this series fairly quickly. In typical hack and slash fashion, the gameplay features multiple fast combos and tons of hapless goons to tear apart with your shiny new sword, or blow them away with your ridiculous guns, all while kick-ass guitar music plays in the background. However, this series takes the idea of this combat and takes it up to 11 through its main protagonist, the badass demon hunter, Dante. How is he a badass? Let's take a look. Shrugging off being impaled? Check. Being able to perform insane aerial combos? Check. Being completely unfazed when he's being faced with a giant statue demon? Check. Defeating a being which is the equivalent of a demon god? Twice. Check. Naturally, Dante's badassery makes the gameplay that much more fun. The combos are insanely fast, you clear entire rooms without touching the floor, and while your guns don't deal much damage, you can use them to trap enemies and hold them in place while you close in for a kill. Then there's the boss battles. These are some of the most frantic boss fights I've ever seen. Facing off against a giant ice version of Cerberus, twin sword demons, something that I can only describe as the embodiment of cyberspace, and a duel against an unstoppable demon demigod at the center of the demon underworld. Holy crap, don't even pretend that's not insanely awesome. Then we have a series characters. Due to a continuity reboot, the characters went through a slight design overhaul, and due to the ton of reviews, complaints, and what have you concerning the reboot, you're probably sick of hearing about the characters of the reboot by now, so I'll just talk about the ones from the classic games. We'll start with Dante. In case you didn't know, Dante is one of the two sons of the demon lord Sparda, with Dante himself being half human, half demon. He also works as a demon hunter and runs a shop known as Devil May Cry. Dante's also one of the most laid-back characters I've ever seen. He never takes anything seriously and takes any opportunity to crack jokes or make some sort of wisecrack comment. However, this isn't annoying as you'd expect, as Dante knows his power and knows he can win most fights he's in, so his actions come across as more taunting his opponents, usually leading to hilarious moments like this.
This party's getting crazy. Let's rock.
Dante is also quite skilled with various devil arms or demon weapons. While he may prefer his sword Rebellion, twin guns Ebony and Ivory over anything else, he has been able to kick ass with whatever he picks up, ranging from twin Shuriken Aquila, giant scythe Osiris, twin elemental swords Agni and Rundra, energy gun Nightmare Beta, and even giant battle axe Arbiter. There seems even no limit to Dante's power, as he has access to an even more powerful form called Devil Trigger. In this form, Dante calls upon his true demonic power, increasing his strength and allowing him to regenerate his own health. Interested in this series? You should be. In regards to the other characters in this series, there are some good ones, but most of the time they're just there, not doing anything. Right, Trish? Aside from the bland characters of Trish, Lucia, all of the cast of DMC2, and some of the cast from 4, we do have some other interesting characters in the form of Virgil and Lady. That's not to say there aren't any more good ones, but these two are the only ones who stand out. Virgil is Dante's twin brother and essentially his polar opposite. While Dante embraces human half and is a wisecracking demon hunter, Virgil embraces the demon half and is a cold and conniving character trying to gain control of both the demon world and the human world. And Lady is a young demon hunter whose main goal is to exterminate all demons for killing her mother and corrupting her father. And the interactions she has with her father and Dante make for some of the more highlights of Dante's awakening. However, Devil May Cry has had its fair share of problems over the years. DMC2 is absolute garbage, DMC4 made a few questionable design choices, and the reboot didn't exactly do the characters justice, along with making a few questionable changes. Well, simply put, in the reboot, Dante acts like one of those teenage douchebags trying to act cool all the time, Virgil's a gigantic dick, Cat was kind of okay I guess, and Mundus was... no. Just no. Aside from that, the series clearly deserves its reputation as one of the best hack and slash throughs out there, and the decision to give this series a try was clearly one of the best things I ever did last year. Apart from meeting these magnificent people, of course.
Playtime is over.
The ultimate fangasm meets the ultimate nostalgia bomb through two little words. Kingdom Hearts. Well, this is a certain surprise, isn't it? Originally I was planning to completely ignore this series, with only a quick mention here and there, simply because I thought it wasn't worth checking out, and I couldn't see how an action RPG could actually work. However, my interest was sparked after seeing a few counters on the series by this magnificent bastard, and I decided to give it another chance. And holy crap, was I missing out! Kingdom Hearts takes the fantasy and adventure of Final Fantasy and fuses it with the bright and colourful wonder of Disney. And, surprisingly, it actually worked. The main premise of the series has our main hero Sora becoming the chosen wielder of the mythical weapon known as the Keyblade, teaming up with well-known Disney characters Donald Duck and Goofy and travelling between different worlds based off various Disney movies in order to wipe out the darkness threatening the entire universe. While the first game may have had Sora follow the typical RPG plotline of his friends getting captured / going missing, his home getting destroyed, and then setting off to find them only to end up meeting the villain and then getting involved in the quest that determines the fate of the world, the games that follow this break away from this plot point and expand upon it, even delving into some pretty mature themes such as death and grief, people and places being erased from existence, people's memories being altered, time travel and its various consequences, and even Armageddon level events and an implied zombie apocalypse with the main enemies of the series, the Heartless. The series also has some fairly interesting characters throughout. Besides the main hero Sora, the Disney characters are pretty accurate to their original representation at times. We have Sora's best friend Riku, who struggles fighting in the darkness, his other friend Kairi, whose relationship with Sora kickstarted the plot of Kingdom Hearts 1, the twisted and utterly despicable villain Zionheart, the strong-willed cool big sister in form of Keyblade Master Aqua, Sora's nobody and extremely tragic character Roxas, and the most colourful and most recognisable villains in the entire series, Organization 13. For characters supposed to have no emotions, they have a really interesting motivation and surprisingly deep personalities. I've noticed the element each member wields matches their personality. Axel wields fire and was originally destructive, brash and hot-headed, Larzy wields lightning as the harsh one and is one to deliver a huge shocking moment, and Alexis wields earth and is stoic and emotionless. Aside from their personalities, the organisation has some amazing powers, weapons, fighting styles, and bossery to share between its members, which leads to our next point. The levels and boss battles. As Kingdom Hearts is a crossover between Final Fantasy and Disney, each world you visit is based off some form of Disney movie. Naturally, we have the sort of stuff you'd expect. The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Peter Pan, Tarzan, and even Hercules gets a world. But some worlds have inspirations from slightly more unusual sources. 100 Acre Wood is based off Winnie the Pooh, and Halloween Town is based on The Nightmare Before Christmas. Even Disney's live action films get some form of representation, with Port Royal and The Grid being based off Pirates of the Caribbean and Tron respectively. But that's not even the end of it. Kingdom Hearts 2 gives us Timeless River, a world based off Disney's very first cartoons from the 1920s, such as Steamboat Willie. Finally, there's the boss battles. While the fights against each member of Organization 13 are fun in their own right, what with all the insane stuff that each member pulls off, Axel sets the floor on fire, Marluxia swings around a colossal slide, Xigbar turns his fight into a sniper duel, Luxord's fight becomes a game of chance, Demyx can summon water clones, Sykes can enter a berserker mode, and Xemnas has, well, this. The Kingdom Hearts series also has you fighting unique enemies in the form of giant heartless and nobodies, and even the villains of the Disney movies that each world is based off, like Captain Hook, Ursula, Maleficent, and Jafar. Nearly all of these fights are pretty damn good, owing that to both the amazing soundtrack of the series and the amazingly fluid and solid hack and slash gameplay that the series is known for. Now here's hoping we get all those worlds we asked for in Kingdom Hearts 3. You know the stuff: Tangled, Frozen, Big Hero 6, Wreck-It Ralph, and of course, Star Wars. Come on, Square Enix, give us that lightsaber Keyblade already!
Playtime is over.
Now, you're probably wondering, what could possibly beat Kingdom Hearts? Well, this does. Yep, our number 2 entry is none other than Capcom's zombie slaughtering sandbox game series, Dead Rising. This has to be the most insanely fun and addicting game series I've ever played. While the story may vary from game to game, the key details don't exactly change. The main character of each game finds themselves trapped inside an enclosed area which is then overrun by a horde of zombies. This was a shopping mall in Dead Rising 1, a casino resort in Dead Rising 2, and Dead Rising 2 off the record, and an entire town in Dead Rising 3. Along the way, each protagonist comes across a sinister plot to either create more outbreaks or destroy cities, or even to take over an entire country. To be really honest, the story isn't exactly Dead Rising's strong point. While there may be some interesting stuff going on, the main point of the game is to go out into the zombie horde, find and save as many fellow survivors as you can, and to kill hundreds upon hundreds of undead creatures with whatever you can find. When I say whatever you can find, I mean it. You can kill zombies with standard weapons or things that would make sense. Shotguns, pistols, machine guns, dirt bikes, wrenches, 2x4s, baseball bats, kitchen knives, and even katana swords and battle axes. But you can also fight zombies with more sillier stuff, like ketchup, liquid nitrogen, dumbbells, tricycles, shovels, spray paint, parasols, scissors, and even giant foam fingers. Yes, you can fight zombies with stuff like that. It won't do much good, but it's hilarious watching a zombie slip on ketchup or marbles. Yet, Dead Rising is a very silly series, seeing as you can do all kinds of insane things. Making the player character cross-dress, which actually gives you a trophy and off the record, ride on mechanical bulls and play on water slides, play a game of strip poker, and even getting drunk. Yes, getting drunk in a video game during a zombie outbreak. It's hilarious shit like this that was the driving force behind Dead Rising 2's Terrorist Reality Online multiplayer mode, which is basically a game show about killing the largest amount of zombies in the shortest amount of time, off the record sandbox mode, which was the best decision Capcom has ever made, and the decision to make Dead Rising 3 much more open world than the others. However, all the silliness and insanity contained within the series culminates in the combo weapons. Allow me to explain. As the Dead Rising series has you attack zombies with pretty much whatever you can find, Dead Rising 2 and Dead Rising 3 gave you the ability to combine weapons designs together to make much more powerful weapons. Combining a sledgehammer and cement saw makes a sledge saw. Combining a wheelchair with a car battery creates an electric chair, and combining that with an assault rifle makes a blitzkrieg. Combining a chainsaw with a paddle makes a paddle saw. Combining chemicals with household cleaner makes an acid jar, and combining a sledgehammer with a grenade makes the pummel blast. The possibilities for combo weapons are practically limitless, and half the fun is trying out your not-so-shiny new toy to see what it could do. I honestly had no idea what the Tesla ball did when I first made one, but now it's become one of my most absolute favourites due to how devastating it is. Finally, there's also one other thing I need to mention. Dead Rising has some kick-ass boss battles in the form of psychopaths. Remember all those survivors? You see, some of them aren't exactly all that friendly, or even all that sane. These are people who've snapped due to some event that happened prior or during the outbreak, and each has the potential to pose a serious threat to other not-so-insane survivors. And man, do they pack a punch! Ranging from a chef capturing and cooking up humans, believing it to be gourmet food and serving it up to people to try and impress a food critic that will never arrive, to a military sergeant believing his dead squad mates to still be alive and trying to order them about, to a chainsaw-wielding clown who traps people on a never-ending roller coaster ride, and a greedy doctor who uses the outbreak as an excuse to harvest organs from the helpless survivors and sell them to the highest bidder. Each of the psychopaths in this series has a pretty challenging and entertaining fight, with some kind of interesting twist in the gameplay thrown in. For example, Roger and Reed has one to be slow and use range attacks, and the other is fast and use melee moves. Cletus stays behind a shop counter and forces you to use guns in order to damage him. TK takes away all your weapons before fighting him, and Theodore doesn't even fight you directly. Each of them also has a kick-ass theme, which are usually songs from rock bands such as Cell Dweller, Blue Style, Hostile Groove, with my personal favourites being the ones by Cell Dweller, namely Own Little World, Switchback, and I Believe You. So essentially, this series is pretty much some of the most fun you could have in a video game. Sure, The Walking Dead and its emotional storylines and moments which show just how people would react in a situation like that, but sometimes you want to ignore all that and just hack zombies to bits with a cement saw while wearing women's clothing.
Playtime is over.
So, what managed to be all-time favourite franchises like Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and even Metroid and Kingdom Hearts? Well, one little franchise managed to shoot up my favourite games list like a Rayquaza on some serious freaking steroids. And that little franchise is known as Uncharted. Oh sweet Jesus, I could honestly say that there is no other franchise I played this year that could even come close to this one. The gameplay is pretty flawless, except for a few issues here and there. The characters are interesting and compelling, the level environments are quite diverse and detailed, and the story is something reminiscent of an Indiana Jones movie. The main plot of this series is that the hero of the series, Nathan Drake, a supposed descendant of the famous English explorer/sailor Sir Francis Drake, learns about a certain historical artifact or place which was thought to be lost for centuries and sets up an expedition in order to find it by following the steps of a famous explorer. However, there's usually some sort of plot twist which usually results in a race against time to stop the villains from obtaining a deadly weapon. In the first game it was following Francis Drake's expedition to find the Statue of El Dorado. In the second, it was following Marco Polo to find the ancient city of Shambhala, and in the third, it was following the steps of T.E. Lawrence, aka Lawrence of Arabia, in order to find the lost desert city called Iram of the Pillars. However, Nate's not exactly alone in these adventures. In every game of the series, he brings along his two closest companions, Victor Sullivan, aka Sully, and Aline Fisher. Sully acts as Nate's father figure and mentor, and the interaction between the two is some of the best moments of the series, as the emotions in their scenes feel genuine, and you feel all of Nate's anguish at the various points where he believes Sully to be captured or killed. Elena, on the other hand, serves as Nate's main love interest throughout the series and eventually ends up marrying Nate sometime after the end of Uncharted 3. Elena also seemed to serve as the voice of reason for the main cast, being the one to call out Nate every time he attempts to do something she believes is reckless or an unnecessary risk. Nate himself is also a pretty interesting character. While at first he may only seem to care about the money and glory of uncovering the secrets of the past, he actually appears to be quite a friendly and easygoing character, who can get quite defensive if anyone dares threaten his friends, yet he can still find the time to crack jokes in dangerous situations and even in the middle of combat. Aside from these main three, the Uncharted series also has some other interesting characters. We have Chloe Fraser, an Australian woman and fellow treasure hunt who is a former love interest of Nate's, creating some tension between her and Elena, Harry Flynn, who is one of the most despicable characters and villains I've ever seen, Charlie Cutter, her hilarious Cockney who serves as the butt monkey for most of Uncharted 3, and Talbot and Marlowe, who acts as a dark parallel of Nate and Sully. However, characters alone don't make a game. So how exactly does the gameplay hold up? The answer, rather well. While there may be a few issues in the first game, with the difficulty being a bit mishmash in certain areas, what with certain enemies soaking up bullets for 30 minutes before dying, and it being hard to see just what your next objective is, not to mention those oh so cheap one-hit kill grenade launchers and rocket launchers, but most of the time, whenever you die, it feels like you screwed up, not the game. Like I said earlier, the series feels like a swashbuckling Indiana Jones style adventure, and the gameplay reflects this, with each game featuring fast and furious fist and gunfights, parkour segments, and chase scenes taking place in a variety of locations across the world, such as South American jungles, a ruined chateau in the middle of the forest in France, a war zone in the middle of Nepal, frozen Tibetan ruins, and even a ruined village in the middle of the Rubukali desert. Aside from this, we are also treated to a crap ton of amazing action-packed moments, such as a plane crash, escaping a sinking ship, and a shootout with zombie mutants in an old World War II Nazi bunker. To be really honest, I don't know what else to say about this series. The games are now some of my absolute favourites, and their amazing characters, entertaining gameplay, and blockbuster-style stories are the clear reason why the Uncharted series is my favourite franchise I played in 2014, and quite possibly one of my favourite franchises overall. I'm a Nintendo kid, and I cannot wait for Uncharted 4.